Hello, and good day to you folks. This is Northstar here. Another video of my playing Singularity. I don't know why some of you seem to enjoy watching this. I don't know, maybe you just want to see someone playing this and look for strategies getting better at this game. Who knows? I hope you're not muting me while I chat playing this, but you never know. Today I'm doing one of my favorite explore events in this. Tea. I do love a good cup of tea, and this has at least calming music when I didn't bother to listen to it, and doesn't have an annoying garden, air quote, where you see random things popping around in a... I don't know what to call the gardens of this game, but they're annoying and stupid. I don't like them. I'm always glad an exploration event just doesn't have one like this. Just interrupts your flow and makes you look at some annoying, poorly done graphic for a few seconds after you unlock a new node. I can't count how many times in the philosophy or the mushroom one, I'm just like, okay, finish this annoying graphic and bit of music so that I can proceed to actually doing the next node. Anyhow, for anyone listening and not ignoring what I'm saying, I like to take the time playing this game to shoot the breeze a little, talk whatever's on my mind. Right now, I just watched a video on YouTube not long ago about OpenAI and the future of AI, and specifically, Elon Musk is suing Altman, I think it is, arguing correctly, probably, and the guy even says, for once, I have to agree with Elon Musk that it's not being done in the best interest of me, which it's not. They create a supposed nonprofit and then turn it into a for-profit company fairly quickly, which shows their real motives. And of course, a lot of the arguments made about AI benefiting humanity are bullshit. Like, make everything cheaper to produce and therefore prices go down. No, competition drives prices down. If the cost of producing something is lower than the price it's being sold, then there's enough competition, prices come down. But we already see that those things aren't translating in our own world, where many goods are being sold at ridiculous profit margins. That is far more than the cost of production. Bringing the cost of production down even lower isn't going to make things that are already being sold at a sizable profit get sold cheaper. It's not. There's monopolies that dominate the markets and prevent the expansion of supply. There's physical resource limitations on the goods sometimes, where you can't just make more of the stuff no matter how much money you're willing to put into it, because there's not enough timber or places you can grow coffee or whatever the good is. There's a variety of things at work here. Market manipulations, monopolies. Fact is we already don't live in a world where lower cost of productions translate to lower prices, and that's not going to change with AI. It's just going to put a lot of people out of work while companies continue to charge what they've always charged for goods and services. But beyond that, that's fairly obvious. You could watch the video by More Perfect Union about that and see his whole argument. It's fairly intuitive and obvious. That's not that interesting. What's interesting to me is that the guy who does that channel immediately starts talking about all this social democracy, Bernie Sanders stuff, and that doesn't work. That won't work. Social democracy may be a band-aid on a flesh wound, and it may, for a little while, take sufficient measures to make people not completely despair of how things are. But it rarely goes enough to really make things good for people. For instance, I mean, we already have unemployment systems across many countries, and a lot of technological unemployment already occurs with, sector shifting, and you can see the unemployment checks are not nearly enough for people to live decent lives. And we already have had disability systems for a long time, but we just had a pandemic that disabled 4.5 million Americans, including myself. And partial or fully, that's adding partial and full together. I'd be one of the fully disabled, but with my long COVID, but there's some more mild cases than mine, a lot of them. I think about half of those are partially disabled and half are full. But the point is, we just had that, and the disability system is systematically screwing people with long COVID. In my case, turns out the Social Security Administration is missing like half my work history from the past. And because it's been more than 39 months since I worked those jobs, they won't let me fix the work history. No, it's them missing big chunks of periods where I worked, just not there, including a year where they have $0 earnings where I was working. It's like, what the fuck? That's not my fault. It's your fault. They should not be allowed to stop me from updating. They should not be allowed to block. They should be required to accept any corrections if their information is wrong, and it is wrong. But you try the same thing over and over, you're going to get the same result over and over. That's why it's both important to know the results of past actions accurately without lies and propaganda, and to understand your current outcomes accurately. For instance, anyone who's politically ignorant has probably heard the communism no food argument about like the Soviet Union stuff. And while it's true, the Soviet Union did experience some famine in its first 20 years of existence, and not a single one after then, like 0 famines after World War II. So I guess that would actually be 24 years. The final year of World War II, they experienced a famine. That was the last famine they ever had. While it's true, they also had famines like clockwork every, 10, 20, 30 years before then under the Tsarist Russians. That was just the end of a long cycle famine, and it was the communists who broke that cycle. That's not the fault of communism. That's actually the victory of communism in ending a cycle of famine that had been going on over and over and over. And of course, they were too aggressive about how they tried to improve agricultural productivity, and actually caused a famine in Ukraine by forced collectivization of farms, which in the long run increased agricultural production, but in the short run it decreased it and caused a famine. So you can say they made mistakes, but that's often an example of a piece of the past that's lied about and misrepresented. And later, if you're looking at just economic growth rates, not specifically hyper-focused on food, which Sierra reports show by the 70s that Soviet citizens were eating more calories than they should be eating. They did a comparative report. They found they were still eating less than Americans, but that both Americans and Soviets were slowly getting fat, and the Americans were just getting fat faster than the Soviets. So they'd ended their food problems by the 70s entirely. But if you look at GDP growth rates, they outperformed any other country that started the same GDP per capita as them anywhere. So an example of a country like that is Brazil. Start off at about the same wealth levels as the Soviet Union in 1920 when the Soviet Union formed. By the time the Soviet Union collapsed, it was much, much richer than Brazil in terms of GDP per capita. And that's Brazil, a country that's in a tropical area with tons of natural resources that had a lot more advantages than the Soviet Union. It was never placed under, the U.S., the West, trying to cut off all trade to the Soviet Union, especially of things like computers. Brazil was freely traded with by the West. Um, Better climate, wasn't invaded in a world war. Two world wars, actually, because the Soviet Union was built out of the ruins of World War One, and then experienced World War Two, and also experienced a Western invasion in the Russian Civil War, where like 14 capitalist nations, including the United States and Canada and England, all sent armies into Russia up by like I think it was Archangels in the area that way, and marched towards Leningrad, and famously gassed entire villages. This was, World War One technology, and I'm sure some of you know in World War One poison gas was used in warfare. Winston Churchill personally developed a new type of poison gas that, well, he didn't personally develop, but he oversaw it as, what was it, Minister of Munitions in the UK at the time. He wasn't yet Prime Minister. And then he got promoted from Minister of Munitions to, I think it was like Secretary of the Army or something, Navy. He got promoted. And so he actually ordered the deployment of this poison gas he'd overseen the development of. That was his pet project as Minister of Munitions. And it was used in a village near Archangels, wiped out like 2,000 Soviet civilians. Not that that's out of keeping with World War One, where poison gas was used by the Germans and I think the Russians and the Brits, and everyone was using poison gas, and a lot more people died. So to put it in its context, it's not unusual, but it was still horrible, and it was a completely unprovoked invasion. World War One, obviously, was a war that was complicated and based on a series of alliances. The invasion of the Soviet Union during the Russian Civil War was completely unprovoked. It was just, we don't like communism, we don't want it to win its civil war, so we're going to go and invade and try and help the White Army win. And that's what happened. That they invaded and tried to help the Red Army win, except that didn't work out for the capitalist powers, and the Red Army won in the end. That's a piece of history most people might not be aware of or occurred. I only learned about it in the past few years myself, but and particularly Winston Churchill's involvement in the use of poison gas, but he was involved in a lot of war crimes early in his career. Like the massacre of whole villages in Pakistan when he was a colonial officer. Yeah, Winston Churchill was involved in murdering women, children, babies in Pakistan. And then, of course, he had a role in the Bengal famine when he was in charge of England during World War II. Churchill was a murderous piece of shit, and if not for being overshadowed by individuals like Hitler and some would argue Stalin, Churchill would have been one of the villains of World War II. He was not a good guy. And, of course, Stalin was demonized and exaggerated. I would argue that Churchill actually was responsible for more deaths, if you look at the numbers in the Bengal famine and such, and consider that the Ukrainian famines were part of a cycle of famines that had been occurring in the area forever, whereas the Bengal famine was caused by British colonial policy, and Winston Churchill was warned he was going to cause a famine with his policies, and he took them anyways. Among other things, they seized like all the trucks and tractors in the region where the Bengal famine occurred, and they used them for transporting military equipment. And without the trucks and tractors, the farmers couldn't get their food to market. Like, they produced food and it just rotted in the fields. And that's part of what led to the Bengal famine. And he was warned that would happen. He knew it would happen. He did it anyways. So that's being directly responsible in a way that you cannot draw similar lines with Stalin and the famines that occurred under his rule. Churchill also in his personal memoirs believed in Aryan supremacy, and he praised the Nazis until it became clear the Nazis wanted to bring down the British Empire. He was sympathetic to fascism. He was not a good guy. And he helped sabotage the defensive alliance between the Soviet Union and France that would have formed before World War II. At that time, he wasn't yet in charge of England, but he was part of a faction of right-wingers in the British political scene who worked to undermine that and Neville Chamberlain was still in charge of the UK at the time. But, or was it, no, Chamberlain came into power later. It was, who was the guy before Chamberlain? Shit. It, Chamberlain came into power a little later, because this was before 1936. Anyways, it was the Conservative Party, it was the Tories, which is, Churchill was a Tory minister, so was Chamberlain, if I remember. Right, they were all Tories, they were all part of the British Conservative Party, and they were all similar and working with each other, so you can kind of blame that whole political party for all of these things. From the Bengal famine to the policy of appeasement, these were all Tory policies. This is calming music. Nice. But, where was I? So if you do these social democracy things, billionaires would just form new plans on how they're going to gain even more power and wealth, and they'll eventually succeed if they're allowed to keep plotting and trying things. I mean, part of the point of, and do watch it, a More Perfect Unions thing on OpenAI, they're very clearly seeking monopolies. In fact, Altman gave a speech at Stanford University in like 2016, very clearly announcing that his policy was to seek monopolies in small markets and then grow those markets. So it's not just unemploying a lot of people, it's gaining monopoly power that he's after. Those go in hand, though. If there's monopolies that control more and more of the economy, then prices don't go down when costs of production go down. And so you get mass unemployment, and that makes labor costs go down, because when lots of people are desperate to work for less, that benefits the rich even more. And of course, the richer the rich get from these kind of schemes, the more power they have to do even more evil stuff. So it's a vicious cycle. It's not a, oh, well, they won a victory, we'll win next time. No, each time the billionaires win, they become more capable of winning next time. Which is why it's a losing battle if you just keep, if you try social democracy band-aids, even if you score a victory, it'll just be rolled back at some point. This is why you need to nationalize large companies and turn smaller ones to workers' cooperatives, and maybe even experiment with breaking up some of the biggest companies into networks of smaller workers' co-ops. Like, workers' cooperatives can be big too. The Mondragon Corporation in Spain is one of the largest companies in Spain, and it's actually a network of a bunch of smaller workers' cooperatives. Because workers' cooperatives don't work if you have more than a few hundred people in that individual, like, co-op. So the solution to that is to create what are actually technically one company, but really just a network of smaller co-ops. And that's what Mondragon showed the way to do in Spain. They've been doing that since like the 50s. After the Spanish Civil War was won by the fascists, and they neglected the Basque Navarre region. It actually was started by a Catholic priest there, a preacher of what might be called the social gospel or liberation theology in some sense. Although before people like him were started to really get labeled liberation theology, he said if we wait on the government to help us, we'll never get any help. We got to do this for ourselves, and he helped guide the formation of the Mondragon Corporation, a priest. And it's helped countless people in the north, what would I call it? It's really the central north, maybe northeast region of Spain. It's right up on the border with France, on the Atlantic coast. Countless people have been helped by the Mondragon Corporation there. Wages are higher, working conditions are better. And when there's a depression or recession, they don't lay off people. They usually get together and just everyone cuts their salaries. And then the salaries go back up when the economy is strong again, which is something that requires a lot of trust to do. You don't see normal capitalist companies do that. They just lay people off, and people sit unemployed, which is bad, because if they maintain their connection to a company, they not only build loyalty and connections and networks at the company, but they continue to develop their skills, when times are slow, people can do more job training, like on-the-job learning. Uh, you can cut hours and people can spend more time with their family, which is another thing that they would do at Mondragon. You don't have to lay people off when times are slow. You just cut salaries and cut hours. Share the pain across everyone instead of laying off the most vulnerable, often newest members of a company. Which reminds me of stuff with people who've worked in Detroit, and they talk about like how it's always the new guys who get laid off whenever there's a slowdown in the economy. It's not good. Those people don't develop their skills as much because of like the engineers and factory workers who get laid off every time the economy slows down. Detroit and the auto industry. But yeah, workers' cooperatives are better because if you nationalize stuff, you put a lot of power in the hands of government bureaucrats, and if they become corrupt, it's a problem. The Soviet Union did experience problems of corruption. Despite that, though, the level of equality of distribution of resources and money was greater than any other country in the world except for Sweden, which is a capitalist country, so they weren't such a roaring success that they exceeded every capitalist country on earth. They exceeded every capitalist country but one, which was a very ardent social democracy. So ardent, in fact, that Sweden actually made plans to nationalize their largest corporations and transition to socialism over like 30 years. They made this plan in the 80s, and then the Soviet Union started to collapse and they abandoned the plan. But the only country that exceeded them inequality was a country that was itself eventually began trying to transition into a pure socialist economy, which should tell you something about capitalism versus socialism and levels of equality. But it would have been better in the Soviet Union if there hadn't been corruption. Just because it was good or the second best in the world doesn't mean it couldn't have been better. Which is to say we can learn from the past, but we can recognize that nationalizing companies is better than leaving in the hands of billionaires. But at the same time see there's flaws in that, and that maybe workers' cooperatives are a better idea. I say this, but if you look at the past, Gorbachev tried to do workers' cooperatives in the Soviet Union. It was a miserable failure. So take it with a grain of salt, because history actually shows workers' cooperatives are less successful than nationalizing large companies. But it could be argued that at that point the Soviet Union was in dire straits and workers' cooperatives never got a chance to succeed. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're a terrible idea and nationalized companies are just the better way to go. And that's something people could discuss if we allowed socialism to actually be discussed as a viable alternative to capitalism instead of a system that's hunted and oppressed and suppressed in the United States. What's the best way to go about it? Do we risk workers' cooperatives, say we can do better than Gorbachev did in the Soviet Union, or do we nationalize companies because it has a better track record of success than workers' cooperatives? And the only place where workers' cooperatives have really succeeded have been in capitalist countries like Spain, where they've existed as an alternative to capitalist systems. Do workers' cooperatives work well in a fully socialized economy, or they only work well under capitalist infrastructures? As a minority share of the economy, not even clear. You could have them be most of the economy under capitalism. I think it could be, but some will disagree with me on that. But these debates aren't had. Instead, people buy into dumb propaganda. The Soviet Union equals no food. Communism equals no food. That's bullshit. History has not shown that. It's shown that, like everything, it's more complicated than that. That sometimes socialism failed and sometimes it succeeded. That sometimes capitalism fails and sometimes it succeeds. And that if we look at things objectively, we can figure out how to do better than we're doing right now. And socialism definitely holds part of the answer. There's, if nothing else, inspirations we can draw from it, lessons, ways to move forward. And argue, I would say, if you don't somehow eliminate the large billionaire-owned companies, nationalize them, socialize them, into workers' cooperatives or break them up. Or also there's another thing that's not often enough discussed because it's considered by at least Marxists to be a later phase of socialism, and that's transitioning not to workers' cooperatives where decisions are made by the workers, but to public ownership where, without being nationalized, where like a town, a community makes decisions on how to run local businesses in cooperation with the workers. The workers may still have a majority of the votes, but everyone in a town gets a vote on, say, how the local coffee shop or the local factory is run, which can be important for, minimizing disruptions to community, like noise pollution from early AM deliveries from a coffee shop, or pollution, air pollution from a factory. You get the idea. There's things that affect the larger public that should mean that they should get a say in how companies are run. But whether you go to social, public, or national ownership of companies, or just break up large capitalist companies into smaller pieces, you gotta do something. If you don't crush the billionaires, they will crush everything in their path. Hell, I'm wondering if this video will even get views, and YouTube's algorithm will probably try and crush this video because it works against the interests of the owning interests in YouTube, like stockholders and big CEOs and stuff who have interests that align with capitalism are not going to want someone on YouTube to be saying these things. And the algorithm is shit anyways. It crushes little channels like mine that don't have a ton of viewers. Makes it hard for them to grow. It's technically unbiased. It does it to all small channels, but it's completely opaque. We don't really know if they're secretly pushing ideological biases in it or if it's just... I know I'm not that entertained to watch, so I can't blame the algorithm necessarily, but there is the possibility that it's doing something shady. And there's no way to know, unfortunately. Yeah. TikTok was known to not do these things, and to leftist content was much more successful there, and so it got banned. Politicized ban that was lobbied for partly by the likes of Google, because TikTok's business model was a direct competitor to like YouTube Shorts, which they were just starting to try and push. Capitalism tolerates nothing that would even approach a real free market. Big companies will lobby to see their competitors shut down, and the TikTok ban is a great example of that. In addition to this being about preventing any leftist content from making headway in opposition to what's going on in Israel and all these things, a lot of shittiness overlapping. Anyhow, that's it for this video. Played enough of this game. Got some of my daily progress. Now I'll let things off camera, off with the game logged out. You continue to earn points in this, whatever score T leaves, I think is what it's called for this Explore event. I'll let that investment capitalize. And I'll come back to it in, a day or something, and buy some more nodes and leave it for another day. But until next time, look out for my other series, my Wildermyth Let's Play. I keep pushing that because I enjoy, or at least I get tired doing it less quickly than my other Let's Play series, my Vorion Let's Play. Guess that's going to be my second favorite. No. Yeah. It's probably my second favorite thing, and it's also my second most popular Let's Play, so can't complain. My Vorion Let's Play, my Wildermyth is my smallest, but also my favorite. My Heart's Iron 4 Let's Play, I'm playing as Communist Germany, and I thought it was doomed. I got in a war with the Soviet Union and the European Union at the same time, but then the United States is joining the war on my side indirectly because the Soviets decided to invade Iran at the same time that they were doing all this, which historically the Soviets did invade Iran during World War II in connection with the British. The British and the Soviets split Iran in two. And then the British never left Iran, but the Soviets actually left Iran after World War II was over. It was just to deny the Germans access to Iranian oil. And it worked. Like, the Iranians were being wishy-washy, and they wanted the right to sell oil to whoever would pay them the highest price, and the Brits didn't want that, and so they invaded, and they kept oil from going to Nazi Germany, which, is a great evil, and so that was not a terrible thing. What was terrible was that the British caused a famine in the British-occupied part of Iran at the time, though the Soviets sent food aid from their territory, from their part of Iran, and from parts of the Soviet Union proper, and so not that many people died compared to how bad it could have been, but that was only through Soviet aid to the area. The British nearly starved the people and occupied Iran to death. And that's part of why the Iranians hate the West these days, stuff like that. But, yeah. Anyways, in an alt history of the game, the Americans have decided to guarantee the independence of Iran and are now at war with the Soviet Union in my game, or we're just about to be when I saved it. I forget. Watch that Let's Play and my potion craft. It's a very calm, relaxed alchemist simulator is technically what it's called. Anyways, I wish you all the best. Take care of each other. Be kind to yourselves. And may always find a guiding star to lead you home. Adieu.